Welcome to the SPYPOINT Podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Brian Stevens, joined by Billy Lawson, the other co-host of SPYPOINT GameChangers. And many of you may know Billy as the jokester on the show, has lots of fun, but in all honesty, Billy is probably one of the best deer hunters I've ever been around in my life. And today, my brother, we're going to talk some deer hunting, some rut strategies, and have a lot of fun at the same time. But before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to go rate, review, subscribe wherever you consume podcasts, just because it helps our followers get more of our content and just grow our audience. So Billy, my friend, let's jump in today. How you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm good. What's the weather like in Florida today?
It's actually chilly. It's been chilly. We had a cold front come in here. I should be in the woods right now.
You should be, boy.
I should. but we actually, just before that front, we got a ton of rain.
Okay.
And we've been so wet out there on our place down here in Florida, and I just needed to give it a couple days because, I mean, I have destroyed that place with ruts and trying to get around. And so we're going to kind of let it stay cool down right now and let this wind blow through and dry it up a little bit. Is what we're trying to do.
Well, the good thing is what, 2-3 weeks ago, you shot a really nice buck. That show is coming. So everybody make sure you tune into that episode. That's a really cool Florida deer that you shot, and that was probably a little pre-rut, buck action. But
it was exactly.
But we're going to get into this, but the rut in Florida starts a lot earlier than many, of us experience in Georgia and the Southeast and the Midwest, and so you could technically say that was probably a really pre-rut kind of deer.
It was pre-rut, I would say, almost right into rut because, down here we just come in a little bit early. And I mean, and there's still a couple of places down here that don't even come into rut till January. But I mean, it's just some of these deer down here. It's just kind of bizarre. But where I'm at right there, those deer were running and it was on. I mean, you could tell. I mean, they were running. The does were nervous, and they didn't even want to stop to eat the corn.
Yep. Well, listen, today we're going to talk some strategies. We're going to talk about the pre-rut, the rut, and the post-rut. And listen, you and I have been doing this since we were kids. We've been doing it, from, a filming perspective for the last, 10 plus years.
Oh, yeah.
And so, what I'd love to do is just pick your brain and give you a chance to, pick my brain a little bit and talk about some of those strategies that we've learned over the years when it comes to the pre-rut, the rut, and the post-rut. And, for most people, if not everybody, they're really getting into that rut phase right now, and then the post-rut. So if you were to break it down, Billy, you've shot, I can see it on your wall. I know from firsthand, you've shot a lot of deer over the years. Give me some thoughts around breaking down those three phases and how you approach them.
So like pre-rut, we'll start with pre-rut. Like when I'm out there in pre-rut, it's like everybody needs to be doing. They need to be in the woods, but not too heavily in the woods, but you need to be looking for your rub lines, your scrape lines, because he's out there marking his spots. When you find those heavily marked areas, or find his trail, because those bucks are walking trails, they're walking those trails. Look for those heavily signed spots, because obviously he's knowing there's something in the area and he's wanting to show his dominance in that spot. And he's going to come by and check that, every day. Especially during the pre-rut, he's going to check it, clean it up, make sure everything's fresh in it and everything like that. Those are the kind of spots you want to be sitting at, during that pre-rut time.
All right. So now I'm right there with you. Now let's move into the rut phase, which I think for most people, they're seeing a lot of buck activity, whether they're, seeking, they're maybe doing a little chasing right now, maybe a little bit of fighting. Let's talk about that actual period of time of the rut itself, which you call.
Well, I mean, when it's rut, when it's full rut and they're running and they're doing, I typically don't go to my standard food plot areas and stuff like that. I try to find the most heavily traveled trails that I can find. When I find that where those deer, especially the does, where you always see does filtering in and out, that's where I like to be at that time, because you're going to see those bucks are just searching and running and searching. And anywhere you can find those heavy trails, back in the woods. That's the way I like to do it when I'm in the rut, back in the woods, because they're going to be running all day. But those heavy trails, that's where your most traffic is, and that's where the bucks are going to be, wanting to smell and chase and do. They're going to want to find them, and they're going to take those trails. They're going to follow where those deer go.
Yep. No, I'm right there with you. And I think one of the things that you add to that strategy is, when you have the chance, I love travel corridors. I love trails, like you said, during that period of time, it is just do some little research around also getting in and out of the stand, because if you're back in the woods, a lot of times you're close to that bedding area and where, those deer may lay down. So think about how you're going to get into that stand, get out, using the wind a little bit to your advantage and those kind of things, because that can make the difference of being in a good spot. But if you can be ruined if you don't have a good wind, or think about how you get in and out.
Right, because you're going to need the does. You don't want to scare the does off. I think when, those bucks, their brains on other things, they're not really concerned with too much of the other. But, go back in there, get your spot ready, get it set up, go back in there, whisk some of those leaves out of the way, if you're in areas where the leaves have fell already, and, that way you're not making too much noise when you get back in there. But when it's rut, it's not going to be that stuff where you sit in the morning till, 9-10 o'clock, get back down. That's going to be a sit.
That stand all day.
That's going to be a sit. That's going to be an all day. You better bring you a couple sandwiches and sit in that tree. It's amazing. And I think a lot of times people get discouraged when they see their trail cam pics, is because during the rut, those typical days when you just get the morning pictures and the afternoon pictures, when it's rut, you get those 11:30, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, middle of the day stuff where they're running and going. And that's what they're doing. Those does will bed down where they can. And that buck, when he services one, he's on his feet and trying to find another one.
Yep.
He'll be out in the open, middle of the day. So, that's where you've got to plan on those long all day hunts.
No, how many bucks have you seen from 11 to 2 o'clock in the middle of the day? Even if it was just riding around or in the stand.
Exactly. And then you're mad because you're like, oh my God, look at these deer. They're on their feet, they're running, and I'm in my truck.
Yep.
This is not where I need to be right now.
No, I'm right there. If there's one thing I could, share with somebody who's, rut hunting and lesson learned, is be able to sit in that stand all day. And it's almost a mind game too. You got to think about, water. You got to think about food to sustain you throughout the day, and little snacks, and even how you pack your food. You're not making a ton of noise. You're not smelling your food, but little things like that to be able to help you sit all day, I think can be the difference of getting that deer or not getting that deer.
It's the game changer. I'm just telling you, you will see more deer in the middle of the day. They're traveling, trying to find those does in those different spots bedded down. They are going to be on their feet. They're going to be moving.
Nope. That good advice, my friend. So now let's move into that post-rut phase. This is when usually those bucks have, bred most of the does. Now, a lot of these does will go into, a second phase or come in late, and you'll have some of these mature bucks that will continue to search, but a lot of deer are run down, they're hungry, and they're searching for what?
Food.
That
food. That's what they want. They're even though they still got other things on their mind, they're ready, they're tired, they're hungry. But that is the point in the post rut when I like to go back to my food plots or watch my trail cameras, watch, see where my cameras are, find out where you've got does. Where you've got does is where you need to sit in the post rut, because you're going to get those bucks that are going to be slipping by there, looking, sniffing, seeing if there's anything that hasn't been serviced already. So that's what you're searching for, in the pre and pre-rut and the regular rut. You're looking for the buck sign. You're looking for that. When it's post-rut, I'm looking for does. That's all I want to find. I want to find the most does I can find, and that's where I want to be. That's where I want to sit.
Yep, most does in a high food concentrated area, and I agree with you. And look, let's just get right to it. Cell cameras and intel that time to me are critical. And this is why I love a cellular camera, because it's going to give you real-time intel. We've done it. Everybody's done it. You get your regular cameras that you feel like you have to go in there and check all the time. And you're disturbing. And so that's when that post-rut, to me, cellular camera to give you real-time intel, because I've learned over the years, don't hunt just to hunt. Like if the wind's not right and you're not seeing your animals, don't go in there and disturb the area. And if you got that buck showing up during the daylight hours, checking does, wanting to eat that, and the wind is right, that's when you get your, behind in that stand and hunt that deer.
Right. Yeah. Especially in that post-rut time, he's going back to his normal senses. He's starting to, now he's more concerned with, he's going to go downwind, check wind. He's going to surround, search down and, smell his way in. He's not going to just walk out there or run out there in the middle of it just because he sees a doe, and I think that's a major thing, is like, you've got to go back to your old school ways of hunting, when you get to that post-rut, because you're going to need to be worried about the wind. You're going to need to worry about your smell. You're going to need to be worried about your setup, because he's getting his senses back, and he's going to start getting smart again.
Yeah. And, we see a lot of people, especially in the Midwest, you got your cornfields and stuff, and your ground blinds work really well with the good wind. You brush it in. You got a lot of these deer coming out to cornfields or to food plots, and and that can be really effective. A lot of times for you and I, though, when we're hunting in the Southeast or Florida or Georgia or wherever, when we're bow hunting, we're hunting out of a stand. And I know you have become, a distiller in this, and me over the years, is you don't hunt right on the food plot that time of year. You're going to hunt back into a staging area off a trail, because what that big buck's going to do is he's going to, just like you said, he's going to slip in, he's going to check, he's going to look out in the field. Then right at dark, that's when he's going to come out.
He steps out. And
so think about your stand
in there that little bit, just to give you that little, because it might be that little 5-minute window opportunity of light that you need.
Yep.
And that's what they do. Like always, the old quote, big bucks don't get big by being dumb. Yep. They're going to do what they're supposed to do. They're going to sit back in there and stage up. They're not going to just blow right in, and that's why I don't like to sit right there out in the, right on the edge. I like to be tucked back in there. I can still see it, but I don't want to be exposed to it,
Well, and you get that extra 5 to 10 minutes of, especially for us, camera light.
Oh yeah.
To be able to maybe get a shot on that deer, or just in general, to be able to get any light to be able to, make an ethical shot on that deer. So listen, great advice. And I think those are some things that, we've learned over the years. All right, man. Now let's talk about some of the biggest mistakes you've made over the years hunting the rut.
Biggest mistakes hunting the rut in the beginning as a young hunter and everything. Did the dumb stuff, got down. Man, it's breakfast time. Let's go eat some breakfast, and we'll come back out at 3:00 in the afternoon. You get in such of a mindset, you don't realize the change that is going on out in the woods, and you're just thinking of your typical, especially in Florida and Georgia, where you're in the hotter areas, where those deer, they're not going to be on their feet all day, So you get that mindset, and then that was my biggest mistake. I just had to learn to just sit.
Yep.
And it's hard.
Now let's talk about your favorite rut hunt.
My favorite rut hunt.
I got a couple I know, but I'm gonna let you go first.
I got some really good ones, but I'll tell you, the funniest thing is my favorite rut hunt. I didn't even know I was in a rut. I was literally 12 years old. It was the first buck I ever killed. And I was 12. I was on our ranch, and Dad, we built this. Well, you knew it. We sat there at the beehive.
Yep.
So we sat in this. We built this 4x8 sheet of plywood between 4 pine trees, and all we had like palmetto fronds kind of walking around. So here you got this 12-year-old kid sitting on a 5-gallon bucket, and
blue jeans and a red flannel shirt.
Yeah, a flannel shirt, didn't even have camo probably, but it was the rut was so on that day. All I saw that morning were just does. They were just running. They weren't even coming into like the little food plot that I had, and everything was running. Then all of a sudden I see these 2 bucks, and they are chasing these 2 does. They are literally running around my stand. Now here you got a 12-year-old kid with this 243, and he's just walking in circles. I mean, it's the stupidest thing. You shouldn't even be moving. And it was so funny because they just ran around in circles. It was a nice 8-point,
Yep.
you know, that we had. And so finally they ran into the food plot. The does stopped them. Like, oh, here we go. And I lifted up my gun to shoot that 8-point, and my scope was fogged up. So I just jump back down there. I'm wiping, trying to get my scope back up, and I jump back up.
Your heart's pounding 100 miles an hour.
I mean, you're so excited, and so I jump back up to shoot that buck, and he stepped in the woods, and I was like, I stood up. I was like, oh man, I can't believe this. And I'm like, and then I actually turn around and do this 180, and I look back, and I go, what is that? I'm like, is that a deer? And I pick up my binoculars. They're fogged. So I put it down. I pick up my rifle, and my knees just start to shake. I mean, this gigantic monster 10-point is just standing there at 100 yards, staring at me dead in the face. Yep. My knees were knocking, and you know, I pulled the trigger. And I mean, it was just that. I mean, that was just, it was crazy because I didn't at 12. I didn't really know how that rut went and everything like that. But that rut hunt there, I mean, to know just how much I got away with. Of literally walking around in circles on a 4x8 sheet of plywood out wide open.
With one of the biggest deer that was probably on that ranch at that time.
I know, you know, I mean, he was at that time. I mean, you know, my dad looked at me when I shot that buck, and he goes, you screwed up. Now you've got nothing to look forward to. This is the biggest buck that's ever been killed out here. But what a memory of but that was what taught me. At that time, I learned about what the rut was, and when they're running like that, you know, because you don't typically see that, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So to see it firsthand and to make that much commotion that I did as a 12-year-old kid in that stand and get away with it and still shoot that big buck. I mean, it's burnt right there. I'll never forget that.
No, that's a great story, buddy. And that deer's mounted at your house, and one of the most beautiful bucks I've for sure for Florida, but in general, just an amazing deer, man. So, all right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite ones, and this includes you knucklehead. So this is,
I know which one you're going with.
This is us in Kansas.
Oh yeah.
So, all right, I'm going to frame it up real quick. This is early on. You remember, we're getting started in the filming, and we have somebody that wants to host us, and we fly into, I think, Wichita, Kansas. The guy shows up in a van with a sofa for seats in the back.
Dude, there was no windows in the van.
Nothing. I just thought I think if it was, I thought we were kidnapped by ISIS. I mean, like, it was.
Yeah,
bad.
It was milk crates and a lazy boy, I think, is what he had in the back.
So we drive 2 hours. We're car sick. We get there. It's just a complete mess. And we get set at this place that was beautiful woods. And you remember, it was raining and cold, and we sat in the car because it was just so bad. And as soon as it let up, we ran out there, set up our camera gear, double set everything. And I'm going to tell you, that was one of those magical days of, we probably rattled in 25 bucks, and that one deer that, you know, lesson learned. If you're going to have somebody rattling, somebody filming, somebody hunting, you better be communicating, because everybody, we had one of the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life, probably a 7-year-old buck. You know, he was huge, not real wide, but just tight and heavy and tall, 300 and something pound deer.
Oh man.
and you're sitting there rattling your
I was
brains out.
rattling. I mean, my sequence was out of control, dude. And I mean, it was.
Well, we were both looking in the same direction. That's the problem. Somebody's got to be looking one way, somebody's going to be the other. So for whatever reason, if you remember, I happened to look down while we're both looking that way. You rattling.
I know.
And this deer is 15 yards looking at us going, you two idiots.
You morons.
Total amateur
I'm just
show.
Up here just having my way with those horns, just going at it, racing the tree, and then
yep. And I'm like, hitting your leg.
Dude.
So long story short, we did not kill that deer. Unfortunately, he looked at us, knew something was up, and it was just the most heartbreaking, but what an incredible animal. And just so it was a combination of when it's hot like that, you got to be in the woods, and that was all day sit for us. Number two is you got to be out there when it's crappy weather sometimes, or be able to get in there as soon as it breaks. That's when those deer are going to move. So we had the combination of the right time, the weather broke, we were making a lot of noise, and the bucks were responding to it. And that was just one of those, like, you come out of that stand that night and you're just like shaking because you've seen so many deer and your adrenaline and you're just so jacked up.
That was wild. I mean, but to sit on an all-day hunt, but it was so exciting that whole day to know that, and we did on film rattled in over 20 bucks, 20 different bucks in one day. That just shows you how many they're just moving, you know, and it was crazy. I mean, it was just, that one was a fun one, you know, to experience it with you and stuff. And we laughed and we giggled and we just couldn't get over it. I mean, it was hilarious.
No, that was a fun day, man. So, all right. Anything else as far as, because I've got one more question for you in general, but anything else around just hunting the rut strategy, you know, again, for getting to the rut. So here in Georgia, you know, we're getting to where I think people are going to start taking that week to 2 weeks and really get in the woods. I know down in Florida, maybe a little bit different phase, Midwest, all that, but just a couple of things for right now to after Thanksgiving, that first part of, you know, December, middle of December, what advice would you give people?
You know, it's just, you have to just change your mindset of your typical hunting. If you can just change your mindset and just think about what the buck is doing now compared to what he's normally doing. You know, he's on his feet, he's moving, he's marking and stuff like that. So you just need to you've got to get to his domain. You know, you've got to get back into his domain, and you've got to change your standard, normal hunting mindset of just going and sitting in a stand and waiting on something to come by. It's just, you've got to get back in there to him, and you've got to change what you're thinking and what you're doing during the rut.
No, and I would say the only other thing, only other thing I would say to think about too, and we've all faced it, is when these bucks do lock down on a doe. Mm-hmm. So that buck is not going to respond to rattling. That buck is not going to respond to, you know, calls and all that stuff. He's going to follow that doe around. So that's when, you know, you have that period of time when you feel like those deer are locked down, think about what that doe is going to do. She's going to want to get up and eat. And so how many times have you been sitting somewhere and you see that doe pop out and then that buck is right behind her? And so that's another thing to think about when you feel like on your property, those bucks are locked down. Then how do you hunt that buck? It's not going to be through a lot of aggressive rattling and all that stuff necessarily, in my opinion. It's going to be go where the food is, where you think she's going to go, and you can do it with the right wind. And then he's going to be right there with her, most likely.
Right. He will be. And it, you know, and you know, and his mindset, when he locks on that doe, he's on that doe. You're not going to, like you say, you can't rattle, you can't bleat, it's not going to work. When he's on it, he's got a job to do, and he's going to take care of this job, and that's his main focus.
Yep. And
he's not going to pull away. So you have to, like you said, you're hunting the doe that he's on.
Yep.
To get him, you know. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to move into, frankly, dude, one of my favorite times of year to hunt is the post-rut. I've shot more bigger bucks during the post-rut than I actually have during the, pre-rut and rut. That's just me, and just based on timing and everything. So I do love that time of year. And a lot of times it's colder. They're going to food. They're transitioning their mindset. And so you get good intel. I just happen to love that time of year. It's just, again, sometimes it's a longer sit too. Sometimes you'll sit all day too, because that buck, and I'm a big believer in the moon phases, may come into that food plot at 2:00 and eat when he's hungry, and then go back and bed down, and they'll have a ton of deer come out, at 4 or 5 o'clock. But that bigger mature buck is going to get up and eat when he wants to eat, and then go back and bed down.
Right. I mean, yeah. And the thing is that's when your sets do get longer. Yes. Still even in the post rut, but those bigger bucks are still trying to find whatever doe is left. So he's going to be moving. He's going to be moving. He's going to be traveling. He's going to be on his feet. He's not going to be in one spot, that's where, if you see him on cell camera and he's already been there and he's probably moving on. So you need to say, I saw him here. Where may he be headed? So you need to look at your cell camera footage and go, okay, he was there. But good and well in your head, that buck's not going to be there if you went down there and hunted it right now. He's on his feet and he's moving and he's looking for does. So look at that cell camera where it took that picture and then go, okay, where's the next 1 or 2 places that's in the line of which you see him walking? That's where you need to run to. That's where you need to go to, to get ahead of him, because that's what he's doing. He's going to go every spot and travel and travel and travel.
Yep. No, I'm with you, my friend. And that brings me to, my last question for you is, what is your all-time favorite hunt, buddy? All-time favorite hunt. It could be back on the ranch. It could be with Spike, with old buck that we hunted with over the years. It could be you and I. It could be you as a kid. That's a tough question.
That is a tough one, because you've got so many different ones. But I'll tell you, one of the best, and it would have to be me with you on your first buck. I mean,
you just stole my thunder. Go for it. All right.
Yeah, no, I tell you what, you do that one. I'm going to say my next favorite one, and you tell them the one that I love the most too. This will be my number 2. And this one would be me and you in Canada on crab claw.
Okay.
Crab claw, we were both in awe. I mean, we're like, oh my gosh, look at these gigantic deer and everything like that. We had that opportunity. I had that opportunity on that giant 10 that morning before and everything. Because me and you, like I said, we were early in our filming stage. So we're flip-flopping. You hunt one day, I hunt one day. You hunt one day, I hunt one day. And we're flipping from cameraman to hunter. But when crab claw came out, your flipping knees were knocking so bad in that alfalfa field. And this thing
right there,
come a long ways. And and when you think about it, it was probably only 20 minutes it took him to get to us, but it felt like 2 hours, because you were standing, you were ready, you were like, and it was kind of, and I'm just, okay, dude, you got to breathe, we got to let him come in, we got to do it. But to get the shot, to be sitting with you, you're with the best buddy, we're filming this thing. This is an incredible, incredible deer. And then to shoot this giant buck, to watch him fall on camera, to see you and your excitement and how excited you were and everything. But to get that, I mean, that was at that time, that was the largest buck that you and I had filmed together,
And one of the biggest buck I'd ever killed.
Yeah. And I mean, but it was just cool. We're there together. I mean, it was just, it's when it gets to you as your, as a cameraman side and you're filming you and stuff, but I had just as much to do with that deer as you, and we both got that deer, and it was
absolutely,
that was just so much fun. Now we wish we would have shot him 3 days earlier when he was full velvet, because he looked twice his size, but what a cool hunt, to sit there and just, I think I could hear your knees knocking.
And probably my heart, probably every blood vessel was about to explode. I mean, You could hear my carotid artery thumping at that time. That was, I mean, we literally watched that deer. We watched crab claw come out of the woods, across the alfalfa field for 400 or 500 yards, and to see a deer of that class just walking to you.
And knowing he could have went in any direction across this gigantic field, and we're just going, please come, please come, please come.
I appreciate you sharing that one, dude. That was to have you there with me is, not just a cool deer, amazing deer, but just to do it, with your best friend was cool. So, all right.
Now you tell them it's the number one, I think, for both.
Listen,
it was so fun.
This is on the south side of the ranch, back in the swamp, one of the most pristine places that we just hunted, and we didn't really hunt it a lot because it was just, as you know, Billy, it was just, you had pine trees, and then you had this open swamp, and then you had thicket. And it was a perfect transition zone.
Yeah, it was perfect.
It was in December, and you didn't want to hunt. And I was like, we got to hunt, Billy. I got to kill my first good buck.
Pumped up. Yeah.
Back in the day. And so I'll never forget, we're in those dang metal, noisy climbing stands that, and if your foot drop, you're done. It goes to the bottom. So we get up there. And I'll never forget, I'm sitting in that tree, and it was so windy.
You were in a cypress tree.
Cypress tree.
It was swaying so
bad. And I think you were asleep. You were like,
I was in the Jeep. I was out in the pasture. I was like, if something runs up and knocks on the door of the Jeep, I'll wake up and
yeah. So I'm like, I got to get this. And I'll never forget coming out of that swamp, the doe creeped out, and that 8-point was right behind her. And that was a great rack buck for Florida. For me, one of the biggest deer I had, seen before. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen. And I'll never forget, I had that old Browning 308, and I just was trying to time this way in the tree. And somehow I did it. And I'll never forget, I shot that deer. He ran off, and I think I jumped out of the climber and just like slid down the tree to get to you. And we get to you, I go, and you're like, yeah. We go across that swamp, and it was a really nice deer. You were impressed. Yeah. It was one of those that I'll never forget that moment for the rest of my life.
I remember seeing you, and you wanted to run across that open flat, and I'm like, dude, no, it's soaking wet. I'm like, we're gonna take the Jeep and we're gonna drive across there. I'm not getting my boots wet to walk across and get that deer. You were so excited. You were like, I gotta get my hands on it.
Well, the problem is, at that time you probably shot 25, 30 bucks 2 times bigger, and you were like, ain't no big deal.
That I remember that morning, it was so windy. I was like, I'm not getting in a tree stand this morning. It's too windy. I'm like, nah, I'm not doing it. And you did, and then pulled it off. That was absolutely, it was epic, because
it was an epic hunt for me. Yeah. So listen, buddy, we're gonna wrap this thing up. I appreciate your time. This is a pleasure doing this with you today.
Yeah, man.
We got some good stuff to come. We've got a few more hunts, and then, look, hog hunting and turkey spring is right around the corner. We've got a lot of stuff lined up for everybody, and some exciting things that we're going to be doing this year on our new place down in Florida. And again, just a pleasure, brother. And I just want to remind everybody to just take the time, rate, review, give us some comments, follow SPYPOINT on all the different, social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of that. And just, again, share the content with your friends. So, Bill, that's a wrap for today. And we'll be talking to you soon, my friend.
All right, buddy.
Later on.
See you.